In June 1944, on the beaches of Normandy, experienced American soldiers who had faced Axis forces in North Africa and Italy encountered something that made them question everything they knew about modern warfare. It wasn't a colossal tank, nor a new chemical weapon. It was the sound, a mechanical and incessant buzzing that cut through the air at 200 rounds per minute, transforming the battlefield into a nightmare where the very air seemed to be torn apart by an invisible force. What these veterans didn't know was that they were facing the most feared weapon of World War II, a machine gun so efficient and terrifying that it would change military doctrine forever and leave an indelible mark on the psychology of an entire generation of soldiers. The MG42, nicknamed Hitler's Buzz Saw by Allied forces, represented something unprecedented in the history of warfare, a weapon that combined German industrial efficiency with a lethality that defied all previous standards. While Allied forces relied on machine guns that fired between 400 and 600 rounds per minute, the MG42 doubled that rate, creating a wall of lead that seemed impenetrable. But the true terror wasn't just in the numbers, it was in the psychological effect. The distinctive sound of the MG42, a rapid rrrr that resembled a chainsaw cutting through wood, became the soundtrack of fear for thousands of soldiers. Veterans described the sensation of hearing that sound as knowing that death was searching for you personally. The weapon didn't just kill, it terrorized, demoralized, and broke the spirit of men who considered themselves battle-hardened. The story of the MG42 begins not on a battlefield, but in the sterile offices of German military engineers in 1940. While the world was focused on the blitzkrieg tactics that were devastating Europe, a small team led by Dr. E. Werner Gruner was working on a problem that seemed almost mundane: how to make machine gun production faster and cheaper. The existing MG34, while effective, required 150 hours of skilled labor and expensive materials to manufacture. In a war economy where every minute and every mark counted, this was unacceptable. What Gruner and his team didn't realize was that their quest for industrial efficiency would create a weapon that would redefine the very nature of infantry combat. The solution they found was revolutionary. Instead of the complex machining required for the MG34, the MG42 would use stamped metal parts that could be produced by semi-skilled workers in a fraction of the time. The first prototype of the MG42 was tested in early 1942 at the Dieppe proving grounds, and the results left even the German engineers stunned. The weapon achieved a cyclic rate of fire of 1,200 rounds per minute, nearly double that of any existing machine gun. But more impressive than the raw numbers was the weapon's reliability. While other machine guns of the era jammed frequently under combat conditions, the MG42's simple design and loose tolerances meant it could function in mud, sand, extreme cold, and scorching heat. The weapon weighed just 25.5 pounds, making it surprisingly portable for its devastating firepower. Perhaps most remarkably, the entire barrel could be changed in just 5 seconds by a trained operator, allowing for sustained fire that would melt other weapons. German military observers watching the tests realized they weren't just witnessing an improvement in existing technology, they were seeing the birth of a new category of weapon. The first Allied soldiers to encounter the MG42 in combat were British forces during the Dieppe Raid in August 1942. What they experienced defied their training and expectations. Sergeant James Mitchell, of the Essex Scottish Regiment, later wrote in his diary, "We thought we knew what machine gun fire was like. We were wrong. The jerry gun didn't fire bullets. It fired a solid stream of death. You couldn't hear individual shots, just one continuous roar that seemed to come from hell itself." The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Soldiers who had faced the MG34 and other German weapons with relative composure found themselves paralyzed by fear when confronted with the MG42's relentless fire. The weapon's high rate of fire created a phenomenon that military psychologists would later term suppression paralysis, the complete inability to move or think clearly when under fire from the weapon. What made the MG42 truly revolutionary wasn't just its rate of fire, but its tactical flexibility. Unlike previous machine guns that were primarily defensive weapons, the MG42 could be quickly reconfigured for different roles. With its bipod, it served as a light machine gun for advancing infantry. Mounted on a tripod, it became a devastating defensive weapon with an effective range of over 1,000 yards. The weapon could even be mounted on vehicles, aircraft, and fortifications. This versatility meant that German forces could achieve fire superiority in almost any tactical situation. American military analysts studying captured MG42s in 1943 concluded that a single MG42 position was tactically equivalent to an entire rifle squad in terms of area denial and suppressive fire. The weapon had effectively multiplied German firepower by a factor that Allied commanders found difficult to comprehend. The industrial genius behind the MG42 lay not just in its design, but in its production methods. While Allied factories were still using traditional machining techniques that required skilled craftsmen, German manufacturers had revolutionized the process. The MG42's receiver was made from two stamped steel halves welded together, a technique that reduced production time from 150 hours to just 75 hours. The weapon used 49% fewer raw materials than the MG34 and could be produced by workers with minimal training. By 1944, German factories were producing over 17,000 MG42s per month, compared to just 1,200 MG34s at the weapon's production peak. This industrial efficiency meant that German forces could equip their units with a density of automatic weapons that Allied forces couldn't match. A typical German infantry company in 1944 had 12 MG42s, while an equivalent American company had just 6 Browning automatic rifles, weapons with significantly less firepower. The psychological warfare aspect of the MG42 was as carefully engineered as its mechanical components. German military psychologists had studied the effect of different sounds on enemy morale and discovered that the MG42's distinctive firing sound created maximum psychological impact. The weapon's cyclic rate was specifically tuned to produce a frequency that the human ear perceived as particularly threatening. Allied soldiers developed an almost Pavlovian fear response to the sound, with many veterans reporting that they could distinguish the MG42's fire from other weapons even decades after the war. Captain Robert Murphy of the 82nd Airborne wrote, "You could tell the difference between an MG42 and any other gun with your eyes closed. That sound got into your bones and stayed there. Even now, when I hear a chainsaw or a motorcycle backfiring, I hit the ground." This psychological dominance extended beyond individual soldiers to entire units, with some Allied formations refusing to advance against known MG42 positions without overwhelming artillery support. The tactical impact of the MG42 forced Allied commanders to completely rethink their approach to infantry warfare. Traditional tactics that had worked against other German weapons proved suicidal against the MG42. The weapon's high rate of fire meant that the brief moments of opportunity that soldiers relied on to advance under fire simply didn't exist. Allied forces were forced to develop new tactics specifically designed to counter the MG42, including the use of smokescreens, coordinated artillery strikes, and specialized assault teams equipped with flamethrowers and explosives. The American military even developed a specific training program called Buzzsaw School, where soldiers learned to recognize and counter MG42 positions. These tactical adaptations came at a tremendous cost in time, resources, and lives, effectively forcing the Allies to fight the war on German terms. By 1944, the MG42 had become so feared that Allied intelligence services launched a comprehensive study to understand its impact on soldier morale. The results were sobering. Units that had faced MG42 fire showed significantly higher rates of combat fatigue, desertion, and psychological breakdown compared to those that had only encountered conventional German weapons. The weapon had achieved something unprecedented in military history. It had become a strategic asset through pure psychological dominance. General Omar Bradley noted in his memoirs, "The MG42 didn't just kill our soldiers, it broke their will to fight. We found ourselves planning entire operations around avoiding these weapons rather than defeating them." The irony was that while the MG42 was devastating in its effect, German forces were often outnumbered and outgunned in terms of overall firepower. The weapon's psychological impact had created a force multiplier that allowed smaller German units to hold positions against much larger Allied forces. The legacy of the MG42 extended far beyond World War II, fundamentally changing how military forces around the world approached automatic weapons. The weapon's design principles influenced virtually every machine gun developed in the post-war era, from the American M60 to the Soviet PK series. NATO forces adopted many of the MG42's innovations, including quick-change barrels, high rates of fire, and simplified production methods. The psychological lessons learned from facing the MG42 led to new training methods focused on mental resilience and stress inoculation. Modern military doctrine still reflects the tactical innovations forced by the MG42's dominance, with emphasis on suppressive fire, coordinated movement, and the psychological aspects of combat. The weapon had proven that in warfare, the mind is often the most important battlefield. American General George Patton, known for his brutal frankness, summarized the impact of the MG42 in a letter to his wife. "The Germans taught us that it doesn't matter how many soldiers you have if the enemy can shoot twice as fast. They turned war from a question of numbers into a question of mathematics, and for a long time, the mathematics was on their side." The MG42 wasn't just a weapon, it was a revolution that forever redefined the meaning of firepower on the modern battlefield.